Local Government Auckland Transitional Provisions Amendment Bill, second reading.
This bill is set down for committee stage forthwith, and I therefore declare the House in committee for consideration of the Local Government Auckland Transitional Provisions Amendment Bill, Mr Chairman.
Mr Speaker. Members, the House is in committee on the Local Government Auckland Transitional Provisions Amendment Bill. The question is that Part 1 stand part. I call the Honourable Phil Goff.
Before starting discussion on the provision itself, can I join with my colleague Sir William Seo in acknowledging the 5th anniversary of the tragedy at Pike River. I had the occasion at that time to go down and visit the families. I know the absolute tragedy that represented for them, the loss of their loved ones, the 29 men that put up their tickets going into the mine and never came out to collect them, and acknowledge also the tragedy that there has never been closure for those families. Those bodies remain in the mine. So today, as we debate this bill, we're also thinking of those families 5 years out, and would want to express our condolences to them for their loss, and hope that the measures that were put in place will stop any further avoidable tragedy, which is exactly what happened at Pike River. Mr Chairman, as we get into Part 1 of this bill, which is the substantive amendments to it, I want to make the point that it would really have been good to have tested out the provisions that are set out in Part 1 at a select committee, so that we could get feedback from those parties that are most immediately involved in this process. The tragedy of this debate in urgency at 9:45 in the morning is that we are debating measures that we have never had the chance to test against the experts in the field, the people that should have been here in Parliament to give their view on the changes that are being proposed. Auckland Council should have been heard before a select committee hearing so they could spell out what their views were on it. I know that they are generally in favour of the changes that are being recommended. We should have had David Kirkpatrick, the chair of the independent panel, before us to explain how that process had worked and whether these are precisely the measures that are needed to facilitate the timely and effective hearing of the submissions being made on the draft unitary plan. We should have had the chance to have the officials from the department. They're in the House here, but they can't answer our questions here, sir. But before the select committee, they could have answered our questions. That's why we have select committee hearings. These are significant changes. By and large, I'm in support of those changes, but rather than support them blindly without having heard the arguments around them, I would like to have tested those arguments and questioned the officials before a select committee. And I note that my colleagues from the Green Party are opposing this, and they're opposing this not so much because they oppose the substantive provisions, but they oppose the process. And what we haven't had, and what maybe the Minister and the Chair can tell us this morning, is why we are having urgency. Now, look, I know on the surface we're having urgency because it will be really good to get this bill through before Christmas so that the amendments can be implemented. But my question is slightly different from that, Minister. My question is, if the Minister was able to announce what the bill was doing, and the bill was drafted on the 16th of September, more than 2 months ago, why was it introduced yesterday, last night, at 11 or 10:30, I think it was, 10:30 at night, it was introduced? Why is the management of this House so bad that the introduction was left so that we could not have the normal procedure of looking at the provisions of this bill before a select committee? That is a straight question. it deserves a straight answer. The bill was drafted, the Minister announced it months ago, but now it's being pushed through under urgency. Urgency where we don't get the chance for a proper select committee process to make sure we've got it right. That's bad process. There's nobody in the House that could stand up and justify urgency as being good parliamentary process. It's not. Mistakes happen. They're not picked up. The public isn't given the chance to have their say. We heard members of the government waxing eloquently about the importance of this hearing process so the public could be heard. What an irony. What a contradiction when we're debating something where the public hasn't been allowed to be heard. That's wrong, Mr. Chairman. Everybody in the House knows that it's wrong. And because we didn't have that select committee, Mr. Chairman,
I call Chris Hipkins.
Thank you.